And we are really fortunate to have today Mr. Jerry Moran, our senator, to come talk to us.
That was an introduction equal to my qualifications. Thank you very much for that brief introduction, and perhaps a reminder that I should be the same. It is a pleasure to be with you, and I'm pleased to be home in Manhattan right now. Easter recess, so I'm in Kansas this week, and I've been from, Sublette to Pittsburgh and Chanute to Hayes, and will be, happened to, in reading the Manhattan Mercury, learned that the Military Affairs Council was meeting today on a day that I happened to be in Manhattan. And so I'm not the program, which has been somewhat indicated previously. General Wiggins is that. And they were also commenting on how large the crowd was today. General, no one knew I was coming, so it is a direct attribution to you. But I'm pleased to be here with General Wiggins and General Sims and the Fort Riley contingency, and to community members here in Manhattan. I recognize the significant value of caring for, loving, and supporting our soldiers and their families. And we do that in this area. We do that in the Fort Riley neighborhood on an everyday basis. And you see it, we have folks here from Junction City. You see it in Junction City. You see it in Manhattan. But you see it in our surrounding communities from Abilene and Chapman to Council Grove and Clay Center and Wakefield. This is an area of the country that recognizes the importance of public service through the military and appreciates the sacrifice and service that those who are engaged in that, are making on behalf of all of us. So to all of those who are serving and to those who have served, on behalf of Rob and I and our family, we say thank you for your service. Thank you for the freedoms and liberties that you have enabled us to continue to enjoy by what you do with your lives and what you have done in the past. Mark is already looking at his watch, so maybe my comments are over, Mark. Maybe you're just setting your watch. Mark, you're looking at your watch. Makes me think I should be done. So I just want to mention a few things. Again, we anxiously await what happens with the Biden administration in regard to the Department of Defense. I've become acquainted with the new Secretary of Defense, but we are desperately in need of a Secretary of the Army, in particular for this audience, but also a Secretary of the Navy, a Secretary of the Air Force, and those appointments, it's not a problem of being confirmed. Those appointments have not yet been made by the administration. And from my point of view, in working on behalf of this region, and particularly on behalf of Fort Riley and Fort Leavenworth, who is the Secretary of the Army is one of the most important components of my capability. Ryan McCarthy was the previous Secretary of the Army, and we developed a close relationship with him. He has Scott Stuckey here, who is the Secretary's person on the ground in Kansas. Those eyes and ears are very useful, but we've been successful in getting the former Secretary of the Army to Fort Riley and Fort Leavenworth on numerous times, and we'll continue that effort. One of the things that I've experienced in my time in trying to make certain that Fort Riley has a bright future is that there has been too many people within the Department of Defense, and including at Big Army, who don't know anything about Fort Riley except that it's out here, quote, in the middle of nowhere. As we tried to bring brigades, for example, additional brigade to Fort Riley, there was a belief that it would take us a long time to deploy. But if you look at the facts, we are the fastest deploying unit almost every year in a row within the Army. And so what we've attempted to do is to make sure, it annoys me, General Sims, as I've told you, that we get acquainted and then you depart. And it's happened many times here with CGs at Fort Riley, and just on a personal level, you get annoyed. I like the people I meet. I like you a lot, and I don't want you to go anyplace. But when you do leave, I want you to be in a position to advocate on behalf of Fort Riley, on behalf of this region of Kansas, on behalf of Fort Leavenworth, to see that good things happen here. And so that natural progression of getting leaders from Fort Riley into high positions within the Department of Defense, and particularly within the Department of Army, and that's happened. It's happened in the last decade in significant ways. So the effort is one of your predecessors. Now I read in the press is subject to a threat in his current location, and it's singled out by name, and reached out to him He is a person that can make a significant difference and does make a significant difference on behalf of Fort Riley and the communities around it. So we're anxious to get those people in place so we can go to work to ingratiate ourselves with them, to learn what is important to them, and to show that we can meet the needs of the Army here at Fort Riley. It is, General Wiggins I think will tell you about all the good things that are happening. We have had some success, although this is a very difficult set of Congresses to find success. The number of pieces of legislation that are of a significant magnitude when it comes to defense is pretty modest. Congress is not capable of getting along well enough with each other to do many major legislative pieces. But every year, we will pass an appropriation bill, and within that appropriation bill will be the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee report, of which I'm now one of the more senior members of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. We will also pass NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. So there's two pieces of legislation that every year must pass Congress. We're going decades in a row in which Congress has come together to pass the NDAA, and every year we have to pass an appropriation bill or Congress, the government shuts down. And so we are in a position to try to make certain that good things are happening. I'd mention just a couple of things. Knowing the importance of this organization, knowing how important communities are, we created a caucus in the United States Senate, which I chair, and it's the Defense Communities Caucus. And it's members of Congress, both House and Senate, who represent military installations within generally their congressional district. And almost every member of the Senate has a facility, an institution, a post, or an air base within their states. And we've come together to try to educate ourselves, but our staffs in particular, on how we can be helpful to the communities that live among and serve our military men and women. We were successful in adding a Moran amendment to the last appropriation bill in 2000, this will be the 2019 appropriation bill, that now has created a grant program for communities who need additional resources outside their city, outside their county, outside what they can raise locally, for things that are costs associated with having a military installation in the vicinity. And Manhattan has pursued that grant application. It was a brand new program. We're absolutely convinced that with the right kind of adjustments to the grant application, Manhattan's grant proposal is something that will receive high, I can't promise approval, but I think we have a grant application that will be well received, and we will be lobbying the Defense Department to make certain that additional dollars, and there's been a number of proposals of what money could be used, costs that are associated with having Fort Riley next door that could be utilized in the community. So it's an example of getting something that we introduced attached to another piece of legislation and getting it through the Congress. General Sims just told me that he is anticipating being in Washington, D.C. Memorial Day to pay tribute to Big Red 1 soldiers on the memorial on the White House lawn. And in this last Senate effort, we were successful in passing legislation to allow additional names to be added to that monument. Those who have died in the service from the Big Red 1 in the Gulf War era of service. It took us, again, one would think that would be a simple task, but it took us, I hope this doesn't reflect on my competence, but it took us several Congresses to get this accomplished, and we were finally successful. We know that the Big Red 1 Combat Aviation Brigade will replace another unit in Germany. We know we have lots of soldiers serving in Europe, and we will do everything we can to be supportive of them and their families while they are deployed. We worked hard, as I said earlier, to get a brigade to Fort Riley. The last opportunity we had, a couple of things are going on there. We worked to get a brigade that was at Fort Carson to be relocated to Fort Riley to get us our third, the return of our third. And the end result was that they were simply changing the mission of the brigade that was already at Fort Carson. They moved no place. As a result, I would never say anything as a consolation prize. We got a set of soldiers, 50 of them. I like to think that the Defense Department, the Army in particular, was trying to make sure, well, we didn't get Moran a brigade, but here's 50 soldiers we can move from someplace else and bring them to Fort Riley. And I don't mean to discount that. We are delighted they are here, and we'll continue to look for those opportunities with the infrastructure at Fort Riley, the capabilities, the housing, the education, the healthcare. All those things make Fort Riley a desirable location, and we'll continue to try to find more opportunities to bring soldiers here one at a time if necessary. It does look like, I don't know, I would predict it seems that the Biden administration is reversing course on the Trump administration's interest in bringing this 2nd Cavalry Division back from Germany. We'll wait and see what the Biden administration does, but I can tell you we've already been lobbying the Pentagon for consideration of Fort Riley for any soldiers that are returned from Europe back to the United States. And I just, maybe a couple other things to highlight for you. The Moms Act. This is something that caught my attention because we have an Army fellow in our office. Since I became a defense appropriator, I have a couple of people who do defense work in our office, but we've always had on loan. Currently, an Air Force major is on loan to us. In the past, it's always been Army officers, but one of them was a female, and what we discovered is the differential that National Guard and Reserve women are treated as compared to active duty when it comes to pregnancy. And the amount of leave that they take during their pregnancy, if you're in the Guard or Reserve, is deducted from your terms of service so that you don't retire as early as someone in the active service would. That seemed terribly discriminatory to me, and that's now been changed. Law passed, and women, regardless of whether they're serving and are pregnant in either the active or the Reserve and Guard, are treated the same. Again, I would never want to say, as a husband and a father of 2 daughters, I'd never want to say a modest thing, but something that should have been easily corrected. Again, it took a couple of years, but we were successful this year. I know that Christine is here, and I just want to thank her once again for her advocacy on behalf of adaptive housing and veterans who need services from the Department of Veterans Affairs, but who can live at home with assistance. And the VA, as a result of Christine and Paul's advocacy, we were successful in passing the Paul Binney legislation that creates opportunities for veterans to remain at home with assistance in adapting their homes to the lifestyle that those veterans are living. And it was a delight to get acquainted with Christine. And if you ever want an advocate for something of the nature of our servicemen and women or veterans, put Christine at the forefront, and it gets done. So Christine, thanks for your working relationship with us. In regard to vaccines, I would announce for veterans, we learned in our visit to Topeka that there are veterans who are refusing to be vaccinated unless their spouse or caregiver could be vaccinated. So just in the last few weeks, we've passed legislation now authorizing the VA to vaccinate not just someone who is a veteran, but also their caregiver or their spouse, which makes sense just generally anyway, but it's also kind of the nature of many veterans that I can't get vaccinated if my wife or my husband isn't going to be vaccinated. So again, a little piece of progress. And finally, I would indicate that up until January, I was the chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. I'm now the ranking Republican, so the Republican leader on that committee. My colleague, the new chairman, was my ranking member when I was the chairman, John Tester of Montana, and I doubt that you see much difference in the outcome of our committee. We work very well together, and there's very rarely, I can't even think of the instance in which there was a partisanship kind of thing that prevented us from doing what we thought was right for veterans. And most recently, legislation that he and I introduced called the John Hannon, who is a veteran who committed suicide, who lived in Montana, named for him. I would highlight this for you. It's our number one priority on the committee, is to try to care for the mental health needs and prevent suicide. The 988 number was a side occurrence from that legislation, and we'll now have a 988 number for suicide prevention nationwide, like we have a 911 number. But the John Hannon Act, I would highlight for this community, is it provides grant money to organizations within communities who work with veterans on suicide prevention and mental health wellness. It is not, if you are a veteran, particularly in places far distance from the VA, and you are contemplating suicide or you're having mental health issues, The idea of traveling to Topeka or to Wichita or to Leavenworth is probably not a very good option. You need services immediately. You need counseling and companionship and care. And community organizations such as, VFW and American Legion, but any community organization, church or otherwise, now has the ability to get a grant from the Department of Veterans Affairs. This is only the second time that the VA has, they're slow in enacting and in implementing this legislation because they've never had a grant program before except in one other instance. Now they are providing money to community organizations to create that mental health connection between that organization and servicemen and women, veterans who live in their community. And I would just encourage this community of this, or you as an organization perhaps, finding ways in which we can connect with. And it also, incidentally, on our Save Farm Act and what goes on in Manhattan, it now is supporting those kind of efforts that are outside the normal box of caring for people, including what we have here at home, support for servicemen and women who want to be farmers or ranchers and find a new career path in the process. I think I should be done, and I think I am. Let me flip this page and see. One other thing. Tomorrow, starting in Leavenworth, I have the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs with me in Kansas, and we will be in Leavenworth and Topeka as you would expect, but we'll also, Scott, be in Junction City, where we're going to visit the CBOC, the outpatient clinic of the Department of Veterans Affairs. We'll be in other places like Emporia and Wichita, and we're going to show the Secretary for 2 days how we care for veterans in Kansas, but also utilize that as an opportunity for him to see how difficult it sometimes is to care for veterans in rural America, in rural Kansas, the distances involved and the lack of professional help and support. So we're pleased once again to have another cabinet secretary in Kansas as our guest. We've invited our colleagues, Senator Marshall and Congressman Mann, and I appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much for allowing me to spend more than probably a moment, and perhaps more than a moment, out of General Wiggins' time. We appreciate, I serve on the Governor's Commission on Military Affairs, and General Wiggins is such an ally, or we hope to be an ally to him and his efforts in our work in Washington, D.C. to see that the military continues to be supported and grows, and that the economic consequences to places like Manhattan are enhanced by the presence of our military. If you all remember that when we had concern that we might lose Fort Riley or it be downsized, this community and Junction City and every other little community around us gathered in Junction City. We had our fire trucks from Manhattan and our fire truck from Junction City, and they met in the middle. And we had thousands of Kansans who came to show a general with a French name, I've lost it, but a French name general, how important Fort Riley was to this community. And I would tell you again, this is why what you do matters. Instance after instance in Washington, D.C., when they would put together that I'm a senator from Kansas, Junction City and Manhattan were the place that showed us how much they loved the soldiers and cared about the presence of Fort Riley. And the idea that what you do matters was certainly brought home to me in the amount of conversation and the analysis that went into what facilities might be upsized or downsized, that community support was the best in the country right here where we put our two communities together and our surrounding communities as well to demonstrate that love, care, and compassion. Thank you all for allowing me to join you, and if I can be of help to you or this community, but if I can be of help to you, veterans or servicemen and women, I'm in the business of answering the question, how can I help? Thank you.
We really appreciate you. We really appreciate Senator Marshall.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Perry Wiggins. Now we have Perry Wiggins. Lieutenant General Perry Wiggins, retired.
Great job, Leslie. I used to tell her that as division commander too, by the way. Let's give Leslie a round of applause. I'm going to tell you, it's a hard act to follow, but I will tell you how blessed we are as a state to have one of our representatives come in and really address us, because his breadth of knowledge is much more than you can fit probably in his pinky in my whole body. So, the bottom line is it's great to have Senator Moran come, sir. Appreciate that. It really is helpful as a community to know really where we're at and where we think we need to go. I'm going to take and just cover one subject, but I think I'm going to set the tone here. How many Vietnam veterans do we have in the audience today? Come on, it's got to be at least one. No? Vietnam veterans, don't be shy. All right, what I ask you to do, where? Come on, Dick. Oh, right there. Stand up, please. We need to recognize our Vietnam veterans. Please recognize this gentleman. And what I'd ask you to do is when you go out into your communities, they are humble to a T. Make sure you reach out, extend a hand, and congratulate them and thank them for their service. We did not cover ourselves with glory during that period. And as a nation, I'm glad to see that we're coming and trying to right what I truly believe is really a wrong. So thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for your service, sir. And then we have, I was remembered about a little known conflict called Desert Shield and Desert Storm when a picture popped up on my Facebook feed, and it was a guy in a bushy mustache smoking a victory cigar, and I looked real hard and it was Art de Groot. So where is Art? Art, please stand up on behalf of all the Desert Shield, Desert Storm veterans. I know we have many more of them in the audience, and I would recognize you, but I don't want to take up a whole lot of time. What I would ask is, and thank you, Janet and Leslie, for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to talk on just one subject. It's called the cornerstone of the Central Flint Hills. And I know that Manhattan is blessed because you have two cornerstones. You really have K-State University, purple, go Cats, right? And then you also have this thing called Fort Riley. And so if you really go back with me to a time, let's say 1852, a time where Dick Young was in basic training. Well, sorry, Dick. But, the bottom line is you go back to 1852, and you had the Oregon Trail, and you had the Santa Fe Trail, and settlers were moving along those trails and covered wagons, making their way west. And the United States government figured out that it was an unpredictable environment, very dangerous. So they need to establish a post forward to protect the settlers, to serve as stability, a cornerstone. And so about 8 miles west of here, you had a bunch of officers standing on a high ground looking over the Kansas River, and they're looking along the riverside, and they chose a spot that would future become Fort Riley. And so Fort Riley, even back then, served as a cornerstone. It served as a place where people could depend on, security-wise, and even back then, to some extent, economically. I think we'd all agree. Now, it had some legendary figures stationed at Fort Riley. We had General Armistead. Some of you probably don't know who he is. I know the guys in the funny-looking suits probably do. But then you had Custer. Anybody remember a guy named George Armstrong Custer? A little brave, maybe some people think out of his mind, but he was stationed there. You had General Patton stationed there. You had a guy named Hickok stationed there. You had a guy named Cody stationed there. And he had a guy named D.A. Sims and Sergeant Major Harris stationed there as well. Of course, I've gone maybe too far to the future. But suffice to say that through the years, Fort Riley has had its share of folks there that continued to grow that post. And as it maturated, it took on more and more responsibility. Now I'd ask you to flash forward to 2021. And Fort Riley is still there. It may have taken on a different kind of nature with security, more of an economic impact to this region as opposed to a security, but still has a security mission because we are home to one of the 11 divisional units in our Army. We ought to be proud of that. And we have a power projection platform in Fort Riley that's right here in the center of the United States. It has a responsibility to deploy anywhere in the world, stand on point for the nation, and protect its freedoms and liberties. That's a huge responsibility placed on the shoulders of those that wear that big red and white patch on their left sleeve. And so the community plays a huge part in that. So they do security as well. So when I talk to people about Fort Riley, and I talk about Cornerstone, they say, well, how's Fort Riley a cornerstone? How does it affect me here in Manhattan? I get that question a lot, by the way. I get that question a lot. Believe it or not, I'm preaching to the choir in this room. You know, when a preacher stands up, chaplain, and you start preaching, and all you have in the audience is the choir, you can shorten your sermon, right? Because they know more scripture than you, right? That's what this is like. But what I need you to do is communicate to your friends, your family, those people that are out there, that if you mention Manhattan, Kansas, what's the first thing they come to as far as an economic impact? What is the most significant economic impact thing in Manhattan, Kansas? It's rhetorical. Don't answer because people will think that you're disloyal. You're not. But I'm here to tell you that 41 to 45% of the GDP of the Central Flint Hills comes from that wired-in facility. Unfortunately, after 9/11, turned into Fort Knox. But that's economic impact. I know that's hard for some of you, because I have season tickets to K-State. But I'd ask you, you have a little pamphlet on your table, I'd ask you to do the research like I have. Take a look and see what that impact is. See what it is comparatively to other organizations in the Central Flint Hills. That's important. COVID-19 impacted us economically, right, Jason? Really does impact. Fort Riley's the cornerstone. So if I was asked to see G, how many soldiers he had pack their possessions, their household goods, and go back to their home of record because of COVID-19, what do you think the answer would be? How many students didn't come to Manhattan because of COVID-19? I don't know the answer. I can tell you probably some of them. But that's stability. Soldiers come, permanent change of station, they stay there. Now, restrictions, Jason will tell you that probably about a month ago we had some restrictions lifted because of the COVID-19, the CG, who in some people's eyes need to lift them right when the event happened, but see, he's responsible for a little thing called readiness. There's a guy called X-Man, who's the FORCECOM commander, that expects him to be ready to go at a moment's notice, so he has to protect the force. But we've relaxed some of those rules, and what happened to your restaurants? They're full of people. I was at the Tall Grass with my wife, and I had a lady next to me sitting in the next booth, and she said, "Look at all these Kansas State students." And I said, "Oh, really?" Well, they weren't Kansas State students. They were specialists, Balfour, and whoever else. The difference is you can't tell them apart. I can't. Everybody says, I can tell by their haircut. Well, not all of them get a haircut by Sergeant Harris. As much as you would like them to get that haircut, they won't do it so. They want to fit in. They want to blend. And that's wonderful. And that's what our community gives them. But I want you to go out and communicate with folks that you've got families here that depend upon our communities and in many ways. Now, why is it important? Why is we stand up here talking about the cornerstone? We heard Senator Moran talk about, hey, in 2005, communities gathered together, and I'm walking around and messing up your camera on that. I apologize. I just don't like to be a fixed target. What happened was, you came together, about 4,500. I was in the Pentagon. I watched it on my computer screen. I was absolutely beaming with pride that this community came together and really communicated to the Army, don't touch our formation here. That's what was communicated. Matter of fact, I went to Senator Roberts' office. You know what he has in the back behind his desk, or did? Big red one flag. Divisional flag. Yeah, you want to go take it? He says, come and get it. He's worse than a Texan. So the bottom line is, I asked him, I said, hey, sir, why do you have that flag in the back? He said, I brought 1st Infantry Division back to Fort Riley out of Germany. Quote, that was the pride it took to bring the division back. And then people stood up. Now, I will tell you, when I was division commander, Ken Lindsay can vouch this, I had 19,327 troops, VA. I knew to a T. I knew all their names. You know all their names? Okay. So, bottom line is, VA comes into formation. He's probably got somewhere in the neighborhood of about 15,000, 16,000 soldiers. What happened? Did a brat take place between 2005 and 2021? No. But the 4th Brigade Combat Team is no longer at Fort Riley, Kansas. Why? Because the Army made a decision to downsize the number of brigade combat teams it had in the formation. And Fort Riley ended up with as being one of only 2 divisional posts with 2 brigades on their installation. We lost 5,300 troops, 9,000 people we added dependents with their spouse and their children. Huge significant impact when you lose 9,000 people to a community, is it, Jason? Critical. And it happened without probably 3/4 of us in here in this room even knowing about it. Me included. I was a 3-star at the time, sitting with Vince Brooks, who, by the way, another division commander of the 1st Infantry Division. We were at a Force Com Commanders Conference, and all of a sudden the slide gets pushed up on the screen, and it has an X to 4th Brigade Combat Team at Fort Riley, and an X to 3rd Brigade Combat Team at Fort Knox, Kentucky. We both looked at each other, and then I went and talked to Dan Allen, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army at that time, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "We have to make a decision." Those are the hard decisions that get made every day in the Army, and they're hard. And the guy, as Senator Moran said, that's really behind a lot of those decisions is a guy called Joe Martin, Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. So, it's important we continue to protect. Understand it doesn't take a crack to reduce the formation. And why is it important? Because there are 67,000 people connected to that post that get their welfare, let's say indirectly or directly. 170,000 in the state. And $4 billion worth of GDP comes off that installation. By the way, how many spouses do we have? Former spouses to military members? Raise your hands. Okay. We don't even count them in the equation for the economic impact. We can't. So let me tell you something. Janet Nichols is one of the hardest spouses, but workers that I know. We recognize Christine Bennett, another incredible spouse, my wife. And all of them come with skill sets and are advocates and are community supporters. Those intangibles we can't even measure. How many veterans and retirees do we have in the audience right now? I will tell you something. There are some people that you work alongside that I guarantee you don't even know you served in the cloth of the nation. We got to do a better job of it. Educating people to impact. I went to a department store here in Manhattan at the mall, and I was talking to a gentleman about how we work licensure reciprocity. He was interested in it. So I wanted to talk to him personally because we were trying to pass legislation here in the state of Kansas. The lady that escorted me through the department store with him, he turned around, I asked him, I said, "How many spouses do you have working for you in the store?" He goes, "I don't know, I think I have some." She turned and says, "I'm one." That's how they go. That's how they meld into your communities and how they work and they have their own identities. Spouses are critical. We need to figure out how we can capture every bit of that. That's important to us as a community. So here's the deal. I will tell you where I need your help. You're going to do a strategic plan. Where's Phil at? Right there. I understand you're going to do a strategic plan. I can't tell you how many communities I've been a part of in 34 years of military service that have done a strategic plan on economic impact and forgot the military. If you do that, I will tell you you're going to make the most monumental mistake in your assessment. That's brutal. I know it's straight up front. But you need to communicate to those that are doing this survey and doing this strategy map that you've got to include where you're going to undershoot. And that's important. Now, Here's the deal. How many people have heard communities say, and I'm going to end on this because I know we got a short time. How many people have said, we're a military-friendly community? How many people have heard that? Raise your hands. Come on, I've been there. It's not good enough anymore. Not good enough. Every installation I've been assigned to, Art DeBro's been assigned to, I guarantee you, he's heard that same thing spoken. They now have metrics. It's called a scorecard. The Department of the Army has a scorecard. It used to be called military value analysis. Now it's called something different. Still the same thing. They are now taking things that the state does, communities do, and they're placing a number against that, weighted, and they're applying that on mission and station decisions. Am I right, Timothy? It's critical. So we can no longer just say we're a military-friendly state. We now have to act. Spousal reciprocity. How many know who Dr. Jill Biden was? Sure you do. When she was the vice president's wife, she had a thing called joining forces. A program that's now been reinstated, and it focuses on three things: reciprocity, education, and medical. So I'm proud of the state of Kansas. Why? Because we just recently approved legislation for spouse reciprocity. Not just for military spouses, but all spouses coming into the state. And I don't rarely ever give anybody a pat on the back, but I'm going to tell you something. I applaud the people that push that across the goal line because it is the most advanced piece of legislation in the nation for spouse reciprocity. Kudos. We meet all the green levels that the Department of the Army has put out. And when they put Space Command out, remember they put the thing out for Space Command, where they're going to put it? The first thing they had was spouse reciprocity. Kansas scored in the red. We now would be scored in the red. Federal impact data. How many people don't know what federal impact data is? It's just rhetorical. This is the next thing we need to tackle. The federal government gives dollars to U.S. school districts here in the state of Kansas for every military child that goes to your school. Kansas is one of 3 states that does equalization for it. Does not look good in the eyes of the Department of Defense. Not look good. Those dollars are programmed to go to those institutions to serve those military kids. Doesn't mean I'm heartless about the rest of Kansas. Please don't take that. What I want to do is adjust it, get federal impact aid applied to those school districts, like Keith Mispagels out at Leavenworth, where all his schools live on installation. And I want to apply them so the federal government can't use that as a scorecard piece negatively on the state of Kansas. Kansas gives state dollars to equalize those dollars, but that's not what's going to look good in the eyes of the federal government. So, why is Fort Riley important? $4 billion worth of GDP. 67,000 people indirectly, directly associated or connected with that installation. I think it's important we communicate that. I will tell you, those that wear a cloth of nation here, we're kind of held to a standard that we won't go out and communicate that. They need individuals to help them do that. The things that they struggle with, the things that their families struggle with, we as a community have a moral obligation to make sure that we change legislation, laws, rules, provide programs that support them through the process. We're only talking about less than 0.5% of this nation that raises their right hand to serve and defend this nation. We're blessed to have a whole bunch of them sitting in the wire 8 miles west of here. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, I'll ask you after the thing. But I appreciate the opportunity, sir. It's right here in front of you. Thank you, Janet. God bless you. I want to win the taser.
Win the taser.
So, I'm going to do the quick announcements. Okay. Just do these two real quick. And then we'll do the drawing.
Okay, we have two quick announcements to make. First of all, we really appreciate having our speakers today, both of them. We appreciate Senator Moran coming in, even with the abbreviated introduction. We appreciate the information that you shared with us, and you too, Mr. So the announcements we have are the next MRC lunch will be May 5th at 4 Points. That's 4 Points by Sheraton. The speaker is Colonel Philip Hazeltine. He was the commander of the 931st Refueling Ring at McConnell Air Base. We have two events coming up. We have the Wildcat Warrior 5K, which is coming up on the 8th of May, that we want to announce also. And that will be at Northeast Community Park in Manhattan, Kansas at 9 a.m. on 8th May. And it'll be a benefit put on by K-State Air Force ROTC. So you can see, I see some in the background there. So you see the flyers on your tables, more information. We also have the Armed Forces Community Foundation Stand 2 Golf Classic that's coming up on May 8th, same day, at Stag Hill Golf Course at 8 a.m. And you can look at your flyers on the table for more information on that as well. Okay, now for the drawing. The taser. And the winner is 762718. Okay, that is the conclusion of our formal part of the program. Thank you very much for coming. Please don't forget to come back on the 5th of May for our next luncheon, and we will see you all then.